So since we are done with the introduction on primary data collection method, we're now going to proceed about one of the commonly used method of primary data collection, which is the interview. We interview respondents to obtain information on an issue of interest. It is a widely used method of collecting data in business, a guided purposeful conversation between two or more people. There are many types of interviews. It can either be individual or group interviews. It can also be unstructured or structured. And it can also be conducted face to face, by telephone, or online. In the next, we are going to tackle about unstructured and structured interviews. First, we are going to discuss unstructured interviews. So these interviews does not enter the interview. So the interviewer in this kind of interview does not enter the interview setting with a planned sequence of questions to be asked of the respondents. So this interview brings some preliminary issues to the surface so that the researcher can determine what factors need further in-depth investigation. Example, suppose that a manager is interested in solving a problem in the work setting. In order to understand the situation in its totality, the researcher may interview employees at several levels. In the initial stages, only broad, open-ended questions should be asked, and the replies to them should inform the researcher of the perceptions of the individuals. The type and nature of the questions asked on the individuals might vary according to the job level and type of work done by them. So top and middle managers may be asked more direct questions about their perceptions of the problems and situations, while lower levels employees may be approached differently. Clerical and other lower level employees may be asked broad, open-ended questions about their jobs and work environment, while supervisors may be asked about their department, employees, and the organization as a whole. The following question, for instance, may be put to them during the unstructured interview stage. So the question, tell me something Tell me something about your unit and department, and perhaps even the organization as a whole, in terms of work, employees, and whatever else you think is important. Such a question might elicit an elaborate response from some people. Others may just say that everything is fine. The interviewer should listen carefully to important messages conveyed in casual responses and develop listening skills to identify critical topics touched on. So, if a respondent gives a short and informative response, the interviewer should ask questions that call for details and cannot be answered in one or two words. Such questions might be phrased like the one below. I would like to know something about your job. Please describe to me in detail the things you do in your job on a typical day from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. Several questions might then be asked as a follow-up to the answer. Some example of such follow-up questions include, compared to other units in the organization, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your unit? If you could have a problem solved in your unit or a bottleneck eliminated or something attended to that blocks your effectiveness, what would that be? Encouraging the respondent to talk about both the good things and those not so good in the unit can elicit a lot of information. Some respondents may need more encouragement to speak and may require broad questioning, while others may be reluctant to be interviewed and their wishes should be respected. Employees at the top floor level may be asked very broad questions about their jobs, work environment, satisfactions and dissatisfactions at the workplace, and reward system. So the following are examples or broad questions. What do you like about working here? If you were to tell me which aspects of your job you would like and which you do not, what would it be? Tell me something about the reward systems in this place. If you were offered a similar job elsewhere, how willing would you be to take it and why? If I were to seek employment here and request you to describe your unit to me as a newcomer, what would you say? After conducting sufficient and structured interviews and studying the data obtained, the researcher can identify variables that require more in-depth information and conduct further structured interviews. So meaning, pagtapos na yung mga unstructured interviews, tapos naka-establish ka na ng data, na-obtain ka na ng data, the researcher now can identify variables kung ano pa yung kailangan para makakuha ng more in-depth information and then doon na magsisimula yung structured interviews. So what is this structured interviews? So these interviews are those conducted when it is known at the outset what information is needed. So ang kaibahan niya sa unstructured is yung unstructured is walang nakaplan na sequence na i-ask yung interviewer. Whereas ito sa structured is known already what is the outset or what is the information needed. So the content of a structured interview can be prepared in advance and usually consists of una, kailangan ng introduction. You should introduce yourselves, what is the purpose of the interview, and you should ask permission from the interviewer kung pwede ba siyang i-record. So there's also a set of topics, usually questions in a logical order. Una-una, kailangan muna ng warm-up questions and then pupunta na tayo sa main questions covering the purpose and the interview. And the third is suggestions for probing questions. So, kailangan mong may follow-up questions that are used when the first answer is unclear or incomplete. So, the interviewer does not fully understand the answer. So, kung hindi naintindihan ng interviewer yung answer, kailangan meron tayong suggestions for probing questions. So, these are the probing tactics. Ano yung gagawin mo para makakuha ka ng mga, para makuha mo yung specific or in-depth information, kailangan may proving tactics ka. So, una yung, bawa dito yung silence, repeating the answer. Sasabihin mo kung hindi mo maintindihan or kailangan mo i-clarify yung sinasabi niya, kailangan magkakaroon ka ng proving tactics. So, sabihin mo what I hear you saying is, I'm not quite sure I understood. Could you please, something ganon. So, could you please tell me more about. Could you give me an example? Could you go over that again? Anything else? So, ito yung mga proving tactics na kailangan parang makuha mo yung, kumbaga, ito yung mga proving tactics na kailangan para makakuha ka ng more in-depth information from the interviewee. So, in the structured interview, researchers take notes of the respondent views and ask the same questions to everyone in the same manner. So, some experienced researcher may ask additional questions to gain a deeper understanding of the topic. So, probably itong mga deeper understanding of the topic na question I ask is not on the interview protocol, but based on the respondent's answer. To recognize probable responses, The interviewer must comprehend the purpose and goal of each question, especially when a team of trained interviewers conducts the survey. So, visual aids like pictures, line drawings, cards, and other materials are sometimes used to elicit responses from interviewers. Particularly, these, uh, these visual aids are useful in marketing research and when children are the focus of research. So, when a sufficient number of structured interviews has been conducted and adequate information are obtained, so the researcher stops the interviews. He or she tabulates the data and analyzes it to achieve the research goals, such as describing phenomena, quantifying them, identifying specific problems, or finding answers to research questions. Much qualitative research is done in this manner. So, we are going to review what is unstructured and structured interviews. So, unstructured interview is used to explore and probe into the several factors in the situation that might be central to the broad problem area. So, during this process, it might become evident that the problem is but a symptom of a more serious and deep rooted problem. So, by conducting unstructured interviews with many people, critical factors in the situation can be identified for further exploration during structured interviews. So, pag sa unstructured interview, nakakuha ka ng data doon, tapos na-feel ng interviewer na kailangan pa ng further explanation, doon na papasok yung structured interviews. So the information obtained from both types of interviews helps to identify the critical problem as well as ways of solving it. In applied research, a tentative theory of the factors contributing to the problem is often conceptualized based on the information obtained from unstructured and structured interviews.